So, hi, this is Griselda Togobo, and this is the Leadership Podcast where I have the honor of sitting with some amazing, inspirational female leaders to listen to their career journeys and also to learn simple and practical tips we can all use to win in the world of work. So today I'm really delighted to have Julianne with us. Julianne is the nuclear energy specialist. She's an amazing human being also. She has 20 years of experience working in the sector in both strategic, commercial, and operational roles. What I love about Julianne is that she's loved by her people. She's a passionate leader, and she works really hard to drive inclusion and an environment that empowers everyone. And obviously, she's been on that same journey herself, so we'll be hearing how she's been able to do that herself. So Julianne, thank you so much for honoring my invitation and making time for us.
Absolute pleasure. And how could anybody say no to you, Griselda? It's like, no, great opportunity, and delighted to get the time with you today and share some thoughts. No, brilliant. Thank you.
Fabulous. So let's start with your inspiration and being a woman working in nuclear. What inspired you to pursue a career in nuclear?
That's a good question to open us up with. Well, look, it's really simple, actually. I mean, when I was younger, I was always interested in the world around us, just the geography of the world, but, how do we actually keep the lights on across the world in all of the places that, from the richer nations to the poorer nations, how does that actually happen? And I was kind of steered in terms of the subjects that I chose at school and then into university. It was really always around that kind of environmental side of things and thinking about the environment. And when I did my first degree, it was all around environmental science. My second degree, my master's, was then around the environmental technology to deal with environmental pollution across, big global manufacturing organizations and technologies, etc. And it was then that I started to learn about the role that nuclear plays within a clean energy system, even way back then in the 1990s. And it really just stayed with me around the technologies. And when I came out of university, I had two job offers on the table. And one was to join a consultancy, and the other was to join, back then, a big blue chip company called British Nuclear Fuels. And British Nuclear Fuels provided all the nuclear fuels to the existing generating fleet. They owned the existing fleet that kept the lights on back in the UK then, which was about 20% of our electricity. And they did the full nuclear fuel cycle, which is what we talk about in my sector. And I can come on to that in a moment. And a friend said to me at that time, how can you go and take on a consultancy role, Julianne? You've got no experience. How can you go in front of clients and kind of and my PA consultants will now shoot me for saying that, but it stayed with me because it was the determination of, do I go into a consultancy firm at that very, very young age, or do I go out into a big blue chip organization, get that experience, and then kind of follow into a career in consultancy? And actually, that's really what happened. And I took the job at British Nuclear Fuels at a time when they themselves were having to think about their own impact on the environment, from emissions to the atmosphere, liquid effluents, just solid waste, all of the things that big, blue chip organizations had to think about. There was new legislation coming into the marketplace through the Integrated Pollution Control Act. That was really important, that then companies had to seriously think about their environmental impact. And that's really how I started. I started on a graduate program. It was a brilliant program with British Nuclear Fuels. And I stayed with BNFL for nearly a decade. Wow. And it was, and to be fair, it's an industry that I entered and I haven't left. Only because I've had a tremendous journey along the way. And that's what keeps me here.
Yeah. So let's talk about the industry, because I think for nuclear, it's the elephant in the room. And I think a lot of people don't get the industry, but I know you are someone who's really passionate about nuclear as a way of solving some of the challenges, energy challenges we have. So if there's anyone listening to this interview or watching it on YouTube who's thinking nuclear is bad, or why nuclear, what's good about it, what do you have to tell them?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is it's hard for people to understand what they can't see. And I think with nuclear, everything is kind of hidden away in the nuclear reactor. That's where the magic happens, and people can't physically see that. So we have to kind of help tell the story along the way. Nuclear to me is an industry, because I've been on the inside of it, is probably one of the safest industries to be part of. And actually, yes, there have absolutely been incidents that we will talk about, no doubt, Chernobyl, Fukushima, etc. But equally, the sector itself is one that regards itself with high compliance at its core, and I think the other thing people probably don't understand is when you look at the energy mix that we have enjoyed over the duration of the last 10 to 15, 20 years, energy has provided, or nuclear has provided the baseload of that energy. It has been a constant 24/7, keeping the lights on in our home without disruption, and over almost 20%. Now it's eroding as nuclear power stations come off, but it's been 20% plus in earlier days, and it's kind of coming down now to about 16%. But without that, we would have significant intermittent issues.
Wow.
But nuclear has been the thing that has kept steady away. It has provided that base load at times where we've had the intermittency around renewables and other energies. And so people have kind of almost overlooked it because it's been so quietly just doing its job safely, particularly in the UK domain. And I think that's probably been to its detriment in one regard, because we haven't needed to talk about it. But now we absolutely do need to talk about it, because the UK has made a massive commitment around our net zero commitments. And nuclear, the commitment that the government has set out is a roadmap to 24 gigawatts of nuclear by 2050. It has got to be one of the key pillars to a balanced energy portfolio, because it needs to continue to provide that base load. We can't rely on renewables alone. Coal is going away, gone away in most cases. Gas, well, we've seen what's happened with gas through what's happened with, obviously, the Ukraine and the price of gas. But nuclear is the one thing that has been that constant. And we need to replenish that constant as the existing fleet starts to come offline. And that's the challenge that we're facing into at the moment, but I see it as one of the key pillars to delivering the net zero ambitions.
So why should a young person come out of uni now? Why should a parent coaching, mentoring their child, or a teacher, career advisor, what should we be telling young people to get them excited about going into the nuclear industry?
So I think the next generation is all about purpose.
Yes,
they are very different. I was actually out with some clients last night, and who are what we call the next generation technology providers, and they were talking about it as well. The next generation, we have worked really, really hard in terms of, the work ethic has been, we work hard to play hard kind of thing. And I think it's the other way around a little bit now. I think the next generation, they're so on purpose. And I see it within my own children, within their peer groups. They want to do something that is going to make a difference to the world they live in. And for me, it's not about a discussion about nuclear, it's a discussion about clean energy, of which nuclear is a component part of that. And if you want to make a difference to the clean energy and to net zero going forward, nuclear provides you with a place to do that. And that, and what comes with that then is the ability to develop a very, very rich career that can be what you make it, in a sector that has many, many opportunities across it, not only, careers in STEM, but
Yes.
also many other careers associated with it. And I think that's the bit I would lead with, is very much around the purpose, being purpose-led.
Fabulous. So I know you've achieved a lot, Julianne. So tell us one of the highlights of your career so far. What's been the highlight?
So I think I don't think I could put it down to one. And I think this has been a constant throughout my career. I've had a privileged career in terms of the places I've been able to travel, and travel was something I wanted to do. I remember sitting way back when I was young, watching the BBC, watching Michael Palin travel the world in 80 days. And I watched it and thought, I want to do that. In my job, I want to be able to travel the world and see places. And I was reflecting on the places I've been, and there is no single place. But one thing that was a recurrence was with nuclear energy, particularly, there is a lot of cross-learning because it's a global market. We've had a huge amount of learning from different cultures in terms of how they have set up their nuclear industry, how they have developed their supply chain, and how we then go to market together between different countries. So I've had the privilege of being on a number of trade delegations, from the Middle East out to China, out to Japan, out to the US, Canada, and I found myself, Griselda, in these environments where I'll be sat, and there'll be the ambassador of Japan and there'll be this delegate, and I'm like sat there thinking, how did I end up in this room with all these great and good people? But that's been kind of that ability to travel and the ability to collaborate with different cultures and partner. I'm a big collaborator, and so partnering with organizations that want to come and work in the UK, or where we as a UK organization have wanted to go and work in their country, they have been the moments that I have taken greatest pride and thought, wow, I am way out of my comfort zone, but I am soaking all of this up because it's a cultural extravaganza. I'm going to meet new people, and I found myself in some extraordinary kind of places as a result of that. And that to me is very humbling, I think. Yes.
I think for me as well, traveling is the one thing that just keeps you marveled at the world and its people, and and the amazing things. Yes. So I enjoy the traveling aspect of work as well. So I know over the years you've made some clearly very successful career choices that have led you to where you are now as a partner of a global firm like PA Consulting. And there's a theme that our members tell us around fear, around fear in putting yourself forward for the next progression, fear in traveling to different cultures and leading global teams, multicultural teams, fear in leading predominantly male teams in a male-dominated sector. So I'm wondering what your relationship with fear is and how you manage to navigate all these different instances where you've had to overcome it to do the next big thing.
That's so fear is, I suppose it's how you define fear. For me, I think there's not a day goes by where I'm not out of my comfort zone. And actually, that's probably my measure of fear for me. I'm never scared. I'm not somebody who's scared of something or someone. I think my fear comes and manifests itself in me being out of my comfort zone. And I can tell when I'm out of my comfort zone. I've got the butterflies in my tummy and I'm like super prepared. I wouldn't that's my way to, if I'm going to be out of my comfort zone, my way to mitigate that is to be prepared. But one thing I've genuinely worked with the best, and that is the thing that keeps me in this sector. And many people will have heard me say that because I genuinely believe it. I've stayed in the sector because I've worked for the best and I've worked with the best. And I've been very fortunate that the leaders that I've worked with have been very enlightened leaders. And that's a choice I make of who I work for.
Yes.
Because I bring all of me to work, and that brings a level of loyalty to work,
Yes.
and for those that I want to work with. So, you know, I very much would encourage, choose who you want to work for and with. That's a really important, everybody has a choice in that regard, is what I would say. And as a result of that, I've had the chance to work and probably be somebody's number two in most scenarios, up until I think the role of PA consulting came along. And, you know, I'd worked with Atkins for just shy of a decade. I was global strategy director with Atkins, and I loved working with Atkins. I could have probably stayed another 10 years, but I'd have stayed and I could have just done the job and kept turning up. But the bit that excites me is the fact that, you know, I could start all over again with PA and start from the beginning and grow a business. And it was my first chance to really bring all of the last 20 years to step out of my comfort zone and take a massive risk on myself, and one that I was prepared to take because I didn't think it was going to come again in this way. It was too good to miss. And it was like, okay. And I have to say, 3 years later, I'm 3 years into PA now. I joined 4 weeks before lockdown. And
Yes.
I've grown the nuclear practice, of which I'm incredibly proud. And we've grown it, and we did that in lockdown. And actually, you know, 3 years on, I have not looked back.
Wow. Wow. So the thing, I want to touch on a couple of things you said. So
Yeah.
the stepping out of your comfort zone and doing what you're doing almost scared every day, but doing it anyway. So
Yes.
what kind of support do you have around you to do that? And then the second thing you talked about is risk. And I know a lot of us, we calculate our risk, and we're very careful not to go too far and lose too much. But you said you felt it was an opportunity that was a once in a lifetime one. So again, I want to know how you made the assessment. What led you to say, right, it's a big risk, but I need to take it now or never?
Yeah. Okay. No, that's a great couple of questions. And I think the fear, the first thing I've always done is build a team around me. And I genuinely believe that the people I build around me, I will probably end up working for them one day. You know, I have a brilliant team, and you have to, if you're going to lead a business, and you've got to have the capacity to think about, you know, the next 2 to 3 years, you know, not on the day-to-day, being ahead of the curve. And I think by building a team really quickly around you that you trust, that you can empower, you know, to see others grow as well and let them thrive, there's nothing more rewarding than that. And for me, the way I mitigate fear is by building a great team around me.
Fabulous.
And that would be the first thing. And that was the first thing I did in joining PA. I mean, I'd already teed up the A team, as I call them, you know, the team that I was going to handpick to come on this journey with me, and they are still with me, and they're incredible. And I think that's the thing I would say to any leader, you know, and I'm sure, you know, in your 100-day plan, as we all do, that's the first thing I focus on. It's the team I want to come to win with me, and how do we grow this? And that was the first thing around the fear, I think. Mm-hmm. I think when it came to risk, you know, I'd worked in the sector for over 20 years. My network is probably, you know, really, really strong, I think, and that network has stayed with me through my career, and I've nurtured that. I've built that over the years, and I think the opportunity to come with a blank piece of paper and do it all again. And, you know, because I'd done that with Atkins, and we'd been on an incredible transformation journey with Atkins, the chance to do that again and build a business from first principles, but this time with me doing it in my way as a leader, nobody else telling me how it should be done, but me defining how I wanted to show up and what I wanted it to look like. That was greater than any risk. The excitement of that and the opportunity of that was greater than the risk. And the risk, you know, at the end of the day, the risk was that I could have come in and, yeah, the massive risk was lockdown, actually, that I didn't even foresee, you know. But actually, lockdown turned out to be a bit of a gift, if I'm honest, because it allowed, in a time when, you know, people were more accessible, I felt, through lockdown, particularly clients, and being able to access clients, and the amount we were able to cover in a short space of time was unbelievable, really, because we were a brand as PA Consulting. We weren't known in the sector. I was bringing a new brand into the sector. So first of all, I had to have the conversation of, gosh, why did you leave? Why have you left Atkins to go to PA? Then we had to have the conversation of what was PA about. And then there was the third conversation, and but what's your challenge as a client? What are you leaning into, and how can we help? And that takes time. And I think if we'd have been out of lockdown, I'd have been still trying to have those conversations. But we were able to condense it in such a short space of time. We got through that, and I think that's why we you know, we got traction quite quickly. And so for me, the risk was a calculated risk, because the downside would have been I'd have just turned up and done the job for the next 10 years. And actually, for me, the fact of stepping out of my comfort zone, you know, going and believing in myself to take on that leadership role, that far outweighed the risk for me.
Yeah. So I'm hearing two things here. If you're caught in a company where you're deputizing and playing number 2 and number 3 forever, and you're ready for that to change, you need to take that risk, whatever that looks like for you.
Well, for me, definitely. I mean, you know, I think there's two things can happen. You can outgrow an organization, or they outgrow you. And I think, you know, where we'd been, particularly with Atkins, we'd grown so much. I mean, everything else was going to be incremental.
Yes.
And I, you know, the thing that excites me is the transformational growth, you know, and I think, you know, yes, I could safely have stayed under the radar and been number 2 and kind of continued to, but I was ready. I was ready to believe in myself and think, do you know what, I can take all of what I have and all of the experience and all of that network and really bundle that up and bring it, because that's the big value I can bring to another organization. And I would absolutely, you know, I wasn't the finished article. I've had a massive learning trajectory coming into PA, significant trajectory, and it's taken me the best part of 3 years to feel I'm now got the business to a position where I can step out, you know, a little bit and take some pressure off myself. But yeah, I would actively encourage anybody that, you know, if you're ready, go for it. Back yourself.
Yes. So we hear a lot the advice to believe in yourself, back yourself. And I'm just wondering whether there were things that happened to get you to that point. Were there instances, or was there a pivotal moment that made you say, right, Julianne is ready to do the next thing? Were there any instances that contributed to you feeling that way and making the move?
I think it was probably a culmination of things. Probably sitting down and realizing, you know, what would I've been mid-40s and kind of thinking, you know, I've still got 10 to 15 years, and I want the next 10 to 15 years to be as great as the last 10 to 15 years. And that was probably the biggest wake-up call, recognizing that I'm not done yet. I've got still so much more to give, and recognizing where was I myself in that journey. Because I didn't want to recreate what had been the last 10 to 15 years, but equally it needed to be fun, and it needs to be something that's going to want me to jump out of bed and be energized, and, you know, and work with people that, you know, I work with people that I just kind of look up to in awe and think, oh my, you know, and that, you know, working with those kind of individuals is what really excites me. And I think it was a case of just taking time to reflect and think about, where was I on the bigger journey?
Yes.
And I was at a pivotal point to recognize, do I want to stay and commit another 10 years with say Atkins, or is this the time to, as I said, step out of the comfort zone and bring it all together in a different way? And up until that point, of course, various things had happened. Atkins had been acquired by a very big organization called S&C-Lavalin.
Yeah.
A super organization, but bringing two organizations together. Overnight, we became 50,000 people.
Wow.
And culturally, there was, how do we culturally bring those two organizations together? And that was an exciting time, actually, being right at the heart of that. But recognizing, as I said, and I think the biggest wake-up call was recognizing that almost we'd set Atkins up to a point now that it was, everything else was going to be incremental.
Yes.
It wasn't going to be the big transformational stuff that we had delivered. And then you've got to ask yourself, what is it that I love about my job?
Yes.
And recalibrating, over when I did that reflection, I realized that in my role, I was getting further away from the client. I had almost given my network to others. And actually I was losing that ability to be right in front of the client. And that's the bit that I love. My clients, the challenges they face, being able to help them, work with them, build really deep relationships with them that are enduring. That's the bit that is really stays with me. And I was getting further away from that. And coming to PA has meant that I've been right at the front of back again. Yeah.
And we talk about reflecting, and it's so easy. It sounds too easy, and so we overlook it, but it's such a powerful thing to pause and just see where you are, where you were intending to go, and what needs to change. So I'm really glad that you've focused on that. The other, did you want to say something?
Actually, it's really important as well. I think it feels a very indulgent thing to do, actually. So we don't talk about it, we don't feel like, but if you can't have an honest conversation with yourself, nobody else is going to make it happen for you. That was the other thing I think I've always realized. You create and make your opportunities in a way. And I think for me, I knew I'd kind of reached a point where I had to have a good conversation with myself of, what did I want that next 10 to 15 years to look like? As simple as, I want to be back in front of a client. I want to take on a leadership role in my own guise and not be part of somebody else's leadership role. All of those little things. My work-life balance. I wanted to be more at home. I've been traveling the world for the last, decade and more. And, I've got 2 children. I've got a fabulous husband, brilliant support network. But equally, did I want to be week in, week out on a plane going from, and so there was very much what did I want from the work-life balance as well. And so all of that made me just realize, okay, I need to now do some things to make that happen. And going back to my point around loyalty, one of the things I had to do was actually think about, how do I move myself away from the team that I was in? Because that team was a great team. And actually, the loyalty with that team meant that it was hard to have headspace to think that you would even think about going anywhere, So actually, consciously doing some things. I took on a new role at the back end of being with Atkins to a new, to a gentleman called Sandy Taylor, who was terrific, who led our global nuclear business. I was on his lead team. But I didn't have the loyalty to S&C-Lavalin and Sandy that I would have had to the team. So I was able to then put in motion little things that, and then be open to conversations, open to discussions. I would have, if a headhunter had come to me, Griselda, and called me up and said, "Oh, I've got this job, I think you'd be really," my simple answer was, "No, call me up in a year. I'm good. I don't," I'd almost push them away. but actually
Yeah.
being in the frame of mind where you can actually now I am open to a conversation, and I'm open to what could be
Yes.
the next thing.
You know, you've touched on such an important barrier for a lot of people, and that is the barrier of being in a great team, having a great leader, but feeling that you had maxed out on opportunities for growth, but not wanting to leave because of that sense of loyalty.
Yeah.
And that, I think, for a lot of women is a huge issue.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So to then gradually distance yourself from that team and to gradually make them, it makes it more achievable for a lot of people, rather than a hard, I'm gone, I'm here, I'm happy, but I'm gone.
Yeah.
And I love how you did that.
I think, I mean, and it was only just, as I said, being able to create the space of knowing I'm ready to move. What should that look like, and what could it look like? And yeah, being able to consciously put some steps in place to make that easier.
Yes.
You know, and I think everybody can think about that. As I said, it's back to you taking control, I think.
Yes.
I've really encouraged that.
Fabulous. Wow. So there's another thing you mentioned as well that I want to touch on. So I have a few clients who are struggling to get women in client-facing roles because of the culture of networking, the difficulty of building these long-lasting relationships. And I know you're fantastic at that. So do you mind sharing how you do that with the family, finding the balance that you currently have and still being out there, nurturing relationships and being the face of the practice, so to speak?
Yeah. So I think, first and foremost, I've got a tremendous support network around me. You know, my husband is a teacher, and so we do have the privilege that he is home every night with the children, you know, and now through a different pattern of working, you know, I'm home a lot more. You know, we work from home now. It's not an expectation that I should be in the office. That it's I set my own agenda, you know, and that's a very different place to be. And you know, for me, it all goes back to really how I grew up. You know, my parents owned a hotel, and I grew up front of house from probably the age of 4 or 5, having to work and be able to talk to people. And you know, it's a skill. It is a skill that I've also, you know, really kind of invested in my children, to be able to have a conversation, even as a child, you know, to be able to engage, to be able to have a conversation, and that has kind of transcended into how I then collaborate with people. You know, we will never do everything we want to do in nuclear as PA alone. Collaboration and how we work with other organisations, partnering organisations, will be key to what we do in nuclear. And I think that's been always my approach. I mean, you know, I'd like to think I am personable, and that's probably, you know, because I've had that skill from such an early age. It's just been one of those things, and it doesn't matter if it's the chairman or the CEO or, you know, the cleaner. For me, they are all you know, important people, and you need to treat them with the same reverence and the same respect. So that ability has been just something my parents instilled in me from a very, very young age, and I think it's been the thing that has stuck with me.
So on a more practical level, you talk to people, you meet them, then what do you do to keep those relationships? Is there a process, or are you just so great at holding it all in your head?
No, not at all. I mean, you know, you will have different relationships for different reasons, and sometimes it shouldn't be a reason. I think that's the other important thing, particularly with clients. It should never be just transactional. You know, for the clients that I have, for me, it's about how do they succeed as much as me, and they go through their own challenges. You know, a number of my clients at the moment are going through major transformations. You know, their CEOs are changing, or they as CEOs are moving from one organization to another, and there's got to be a personal kind of engagement there, just to check in and say, are you okay? You know, there's a big change coming. What do you need? Rather than it be the transactional, it's about how can we ensure that you set yourself up for success from day one, giving them almost space in their kind of space in their pace to really think about how they can be successful. And I think the fact that we think about, and I think about, you know, them from a personal perspective and not just transactional. When's the next deal coming? Of course, the next deal's on my mind. That's what I'm here to do, you know. But equally, it's not all about that. It's not, you know, and I think we collaborate on things that are volunteering. We collaborate as partners and clients on things that are about the purpose of delivering the work, etc. But it's about building, I think, long-term, enduring relationships based on trust, and that takes time. That doesn't take a drink, and it doesn't take a coffee and a dinner. It takes, you've got to earn respect and deliver on the things that you said you would deliver. And I think that's been probably the thing I've you know, I hold myself and I hold my team. If you commit to me or I commit to you, well, I will deliver on
You're
that.
fantastic at that. I know every time I speak to you, before we even end the call, the email is through. You're amazing at that. And actually, I always like to sleep on things and do things the next day, but I've also seen the value in the way that you do things, in that it's so quick off the back of any call. You don't leave any chance of it not getting done.
Yeah, I think there's two things. I think there is something about just being on it, but you know, there is definitely the slower pace of, you know, and I think the immediate response is to give the surety to whoever it is I've got to. And I'll come back a slower time. But you're right. I think response and the feedback to people is really, really important, because it helps them realize that actually they are a priority in your day. You know, it's something that I have the privilege of working externally with large corporations. So I am part of the team. We work in partnership, but I'm not part of the team. And I've noticed how people deal with their consultants, as you would have seen. It just gives you, it either makes you feel really great to be delivering for this company, or it makes you feel like a spare pair of trousers that they put on every now and again. So then, even though you know it's a relationship and you know it's a deal and it needs to be delivered, you don't have the same heart in it, because you don't feel like you're being valued as a person, even though you're external. So I really love that you make that effort to give that certainty and to follow up so quickly. Another question I have on my list here is around systemic bias and women rising through the ranks. So there aren't a lot of female partners across most industries. It's not common. So it's an industry that's really hard to become partner in, and you've done that. So what advice do you have for women who are also looking to break through the systemic bias and to take a well-earned seat at the top table? So probably the best way to answer this, so I do wear a couple of hats in terms of, first and foremost, obviously the you know, partner lead for our nuclear practice, and I very consciously recognized that when I stepped into that role, I needed to think about, how did I want to show up? Even on day one, how did I want to show up as a leader in PA? And for me, there were two things that I said to myself. I want to be an accessible leader and a visible leader. And it really came to the fore pretty much in day two of me being at PA Consulting, which will come on to the other hat that I wear. I was in the queue for the toilets, and this lovely, lovely young consultant said to me, she introduced herself and I introduced myself, and I said, I was on day two, and you know, I've just joined as a partner. And she looked at me and she went, "You're a partner and you're a woman and you're in the toilet queue." I was like, yes. And yes, and she was just totally blown away, and it was as if she'd never met anybody of that, and in the toilet queue, to be fair to her. And it just made me realize that I've now turned up with a massive responsibility. I'm not just turning up to do my job, which is really, really important, by the way, but equally I'm turning up as a leader to inspire all of these fabulous consultants, principal consultants, all of this next generation that are coming through. And I didn't have that epiphany until I stood in that toilet queue. And that made me then realize, and this is where I know we've collaborated, Griselda, I then I was invited about probably 8 months later, because then I threw myself into our women's network. Yes. I then became partner sponsor of the Women's Network at PA, which is, a real privilege, because it's a very grassroots network. It's about 700 people. Our CEO, he is an enlightened kind of leader in the fact that he just says, I want us to be the most inclusive and diverse consulting organization, and then he drops the mic, quite literally, and so he really is behind the networks. And what I've seen since I joined PA, it's like been night and day, the transformation of how we are driving that kind of diversity increase. And I know that that's not everywhere, and I suppose my advice to people is, and we'll probably come on to this around maybe mentoring and stuff, but I think people need to find their sponsors in organizations, and not go out and be very pointed in that, but just don't be afraid to ask. If you don't ask, you won't get. And getting to know those that are above you, around you, that can help you navigate when you're not in the room, they can be the voice on your behalf. Finding those sponsors is really, really important. And I didn't realize that until probably subconsciously. I think I have had sponsors, and I can probably go back and actually identify them and name them. I've only had a couple, but they would have been the people that really were representing me in a room when an opportunity came. When an opportunity came, many years ago, I had the opportunity to work on a secondment for 1 year with the chairman of BNFL. And I was 5 years into my career, and, I wouldn't have been put forward to that if somebody else didn't actually believe that I could do it. I wasn't in the room. I wasn't in any of the discussions. And those kind of having those sponsors and building those sponsorship relationships, really, really important. And I think that is never ending, for me still, I have my sponsors, I'm sure, still within PA. I might not know who they actively are, but I know I've got them. And so mentoring has helped me along the way, but I think finding those sponsors really, really important as well. So that would be part of my advice. I suppose my other advice would be never turn down an opportunity. A door opens for a reason. Open it, follow it, go through it, and don't have regrets, because it'll take you somewhere else. And I never wrote this story. This story has been written as we've gone, but all I did throughout was take every opportunity, and as a result of that, I've had no regrets. And maybe I've told myself there'll be no regrets, because I'm going to make it work. I will make it work. But that's but I know there's, we've got systemic challenges which we are working through within PA. So that was the second hat, as I said, partner sponsor for our network. And then the third hat is the Women in Nuclear, and recognizing when I arrived at PA, actually, I've got now a leadership role in our sector, not only in my organization, but in my sector. So how do I bring that into the sector? And I'm very passionate about our Women in Nuclear endeavors to drive 40% gender parity into the sector. It's too slow in my world by 2030, but we've got to break down those barriers, as you said, and there's a huge amount of work going on in early careers, into educating STEM careers and opening up the opportunities for the next generation, just giving people the tools around leadership how to understand themselves, what their leadership style is, you know, and giving them the opportunity and the tools and the techniques to help them come, you know, more equipped to deal with some of those systematic barriers.
Yes, yes. So, Julianne, we've talked a lot about your role as a visible leader internally and externally. So I'm sure you've had the chance to deal with a lot of young people coming into the sector. And I know young people here mentoring, they hear sponsoring, they know the value that it brings. What do you think is stopping a lot of people from accessing that level of support?
I think in many circumstances is they're too afraid to ask, and they don't know.
Fear again.
Yeah, it is back to that, you know. They're almost waiting for permission. Sure. And I would say don't wait for permission. You know, it goes back to that, if you don't ask, you don't get. But we've got to help the younger entrants to the sector and to the industry to recognise that there are all of these different levers available for them to pull. We've got to be more transparent and open in what they are. You know, yes. Be that access to mentors, be that access to sponsorship, specific courses, but also self-development as well. You know, I think this ownership, not for it always to be led by the organisation. I think, you know, self-development and personal development is really, really key as well. You know, I've always supplemented whatever I've done within the organisation with something externally because it comes with something different. And that builds a different network in itself. So I think we as organisations and as leaders need to be open and transparent about what those levers could look like. And I think that's what we're trying to do, particularly, you know, my own organisation. You know, we're working through that to build the future generation so that it really is, you know, gender parity going through and not just gender, you know, all dimensions of diversity actually. Yes. You know, we went down the gender piece, but I would say far more broader than just that.
So if you had to change anything and do it again, what would you change, Julianne?
So I think it took me a long time to bring me to the whole of me to my job. I remember when I started way back at Springfields back in 1997, walking through the gate. It was a big manufacturing facility as part of the British Nuclear Fuels, and I walked through and I think I left half of me at the gate. And I left the bit that is the personal side of me in terms of, you know, I'm a mum, I'm a wife. I wasn't back then, but equally, you know, I did fun things back then. And I think I did that because I was stepping into a male-dominated environment and I didn't want to invite question. I didn't want to invite anybody to know anything other than what you see in front of you. A very professional, you know, and you know, well dressed. I don't say, but because I think I put a natural barrier up, and it wasn't until I don't think it wasn't until I started work with Atkins back in 2010, which, as you can sense, as a big place in my heart. I realised that actually you can bring all of yourself to work, and actually by bringing me, the whole of me has been probably the biggest release, I think, because I don't have to watch my P's and Q's as much as I used to. And actually, you know, sharing the stories of you know, what my kids have done, and you know, the fact that I was out dancing in a nightclub in Liverpool with my friends on Saturday night to great 1980s music is, you know, my team now know that I am human, which is really important. But bringing your whole self, it took me a long time to do that. But once I did, wow, it was a totally different, because then I realized that the people I work with, I probably spend the most time with. Why wouldn't I let them know what's happening around me, with me, and let them see, you know, warts and all. And I think it took me a long time, too long to realize that.
Too long. I think I relate to that as well. I think there's so much fear in people bringing their whole selves to work because they're afraid they won't be accepted, they'll be judged.
Yes.
And you know, they might be penalized even for doing that. So we all end up trying to be something we are not. And by trying to do that, you are ineffective, because you can't build meaningful relationships with people if you're not bringing your whole selves to it. So I'm really glad that that's the thing you wish you would change if you had to do it again. So this is just me now having a bit of fun with the interview. I like to know what routine you follow, because burnout is rampant. And, you know, for you to be working at this capacity and being productive and healthy and having fun and being positive, you must be doing something really great. So I want to know, just for me, what routine you follow, if you have one.
I kind of do, actually. I like the simple things in life, believe it or not. So I'm blessed that, you know, I get time now because of the change in the way we work. The first thing I have in the morning is a cup of tea, and I have a cup of tea and I read my book, whatever I'm reading. I've normally got 2 or 3 on the go, depending on what mood I'm in. And that 20, 25, maybe 30 minutes max that I would give myself is just me time before I give the rest of the day to everybody else. And actually it's my kind of the bit I love the most, sitting and just reading my book, having my cup of tea, and then I'm ready. I now get obviously breakfast with the children and get to take them to school, which is brilliant. You know, just love that time. And then it's pretty much crack on. You know, priority is the team, touching base with the team, then the clients, and then the more organizational things. But I'm simple in that I've got to do 3 hits a week. There's got to be a minimum of 3 hits a week when it comes to exercise in terms of, you know, and anything above that is a plus. So that'll entail either being out on the bike. I'm a big cyclist. I love my my road bike. Anything with speed is probably is a good thing for me. So definitely the gym, cycling, and then weekends will entail a big walk somewhere. I feel we're at a point in the family where the kids, you know, they're 11 and 14, and phones have arrived in the house. And the way to keep us connected is to get out of the house together. We love walks, big walks. We'll take a big picnic, and you know, they moan and do we have to today? And it's like, once they're out, the first thing I guarantee you they will say to us, "Oh, I'm so glad we did this." And they'll be like, "It's really cool, isn't this lovely?" You know, and once we know they're out, they're fab. So, and then, you know, this has got to be back to my Saturday night dancing. There's got to be dancing. Just dancing.
I know. I've seen you dancing.
Yeah. I mean, honest to goodness, does that not just give you the great vibes? And
I knew you were my person. Immediately I saw you dancing. I said, yes, that's my kind of woman.
So I'm coming up to a big milestone next year, actually, Griselda, and everybody's been asking me, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to hold a big party, and I'm actually going to do it. I'm going to actually have a party throughout the year and decide that it's just going to involve dancing in whatever form that comes. But different places, different dancing, because it just makes you feel good.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Every time.
Yeah. I have a group of girlfriends I go dancing with as well. You know, everybody sees you as a serious person, but you know, you're human. You have a life. You have friends. You like to move. You get great joy from dancing. So why not? So yes, I love that. Enjoy your birthday when it arrives.
I certainly will.
And then last thing, do you have a book recommendation for us?
So I said I've normally got about 3 books on the go at any one time. And there's a reason for that, because I normally have something, you know, work related, because there's so much going on in terms of you know, what my role as women's network in the network. I feel that, you know, there's so much to learn out there at the moment. I always feel that reading what my son is reading is a way to connect with him. He reads like I can't keep up with him, and so he'll read a series, and then I'll say, right, let me read it, so that we can kind of find a way to. So he's just, I'm just coming up to the third book of Shadow and Bone, which Liebe Bardugo, I think, is the author, and it's of course on Netflix. So now, you know, we've finished the books and he can watch the Netflix. So it's just a nice way. But of course, a mutual friend of ours, which is Diana Theodoros. She is my she's done a book which was Performing for You, and she's been kind of a bit of a coach in my pocket for and my go-to back to that book kind of remains with me, I think, and that would be probably my recommendation, would be Performing as You.
Yes.
Diana Theodoros. It's just a lovely read, and when I read it, I can hear Diana,
her voice. She's amazing.
Well, she was, you know, she was a ballet an international ballet dancer, and you know, she is so beautiful, and you know, she's translated that into the work in place now, and how to bring your best to work, and it's just a beautiful read, and it's really interactive as well, and I think that would be a great recommendation for people if they've listened.
We already have Diana on our list. She is doing a mentoring session for our members, and we have a copy of the book based on Mentoring as You. So I'm delighted that you introduced us. You brought her into my life as well. So thank you so much for that. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we sign off, Julianne?
Other than to say it has been a privilege to just get the time with you, Griselda. I know how busy you are, and you know, I've come off this more inspired talking to you as always, so it's just great, and thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you. And last, I know I keep saying last, but that was the last one. But I know when you won the Forward Ladies Award, you loved it. You encourage people to apply. I just want to know, in very quickly, what winning that award did for you, so we can encourage more people to apply.
I mean, first and foremost, what you've created, Griselda, through Forward Ladies is phenomenal. And you know, I came to it and I had no inkling that I was going to be successful, but that came as I was going through my partner process with PA Consulting.
Yeah. Wow.
And you know, I won the STEM award, and it was in 2019, and you know, I went to the event and was completely blown away by what you had created, brought together. But you know, that was game changing, because it was almost, because it had happened as I was going through my own personal kind of process with PA. It was an endorsement to them as much as to me, that hey, you know, she's okay, you should back this girl. So the timing of it was serendipity, absolutely, but it was game changing, and hence why it's really important. You know, it's called Forward Ladies because I think you have a responsibility to forward on, you know, and it's there's a ripple effect with Forward Ladies, you know, and now I have the privilege of course being a judge. Which is just tremendous, seeing the next generation coming through, and you know, the event that you held back in November of last year was tremendous, and I know we've got the event coming up in London in November which will be amazing, and we will be sponsoring as PA, and so it'll be great.
Fantastic. Well, you've just made my day with that.
Good.
I feel so honored to know you, for you to be in my circle. This is what makes work worth it. It makes work so much fun, and I feel so honored to have such amazing people in my network. So thank you so much, Julianne. I know people will be inspired by your story as well. Thank you so much, Griselda, and have a super day. And you too. Thank you. Bye for now. Bye. Fabulous.